I'm afraid I don't have a video, so listen to me. I'm from Oxford Policy Management here in India, and I'm going to focus on one program that we recently completed, a 5-year program, DFID funded, that was working in 10 locations, national and subnational, including 6 states in India. And this was implemented in partnership with a huge number of organizations across the region. And it really is an example of the opportunities and challenges of multi-partnerships and multi-sector collaboration. It had a broad focus of mainstreaming adaptation into the development process and planning process. So we had to find financial, policy, planning entry points across those locations. We were proud of some of the successes that we had, most notably, we leveraged $1.2 billion for adaptation. This is a 40-fold return of the original funding from DFID. We could measure success in terms of the impact on vulnerable populations. For example, 3 million people are benefiting from a new real-time flood forecasting and early warning system in Orissa. But today I'm just going to give a very broad overview of some of the work on climate resilient agriculture, which was obviously, given the region, a big part of this program. So the mandate of the program meant that we focused on the sort of resilient aspect of climate smart agriculture. We piloted different ways of scaling up climate resilient agriculture. So we developed an approach that focused on the different phases of the agriculture value chain. And then we used different set of entry points, so policy and institutions, finance, information and knowledge management, technology and asset management. So for example, we carried out climate resilient agriculture value change in 7 locations in 3 countries. This served 2 purposes. Firstly, we were interested to introduce and institutionalize this type of analysis and decision making within the government, but it also provided an evidence base to actually identify what changes and actions were needed. So for example, with the Assam Agriculture University, the analysis studied value chain of a whole variety of crops. This led to the government adopting a detailed roadmap for reviving ginger crop, and also to establish a framework for creating seed banks. So we also worked with a number of governments, such as Bihar, and in Pakistan and Bangladesh, to integrate climate change into various overarching agriculture policies. So a little bit more detail then on one example that we used to try and promote climate resilient agriculture at scale, which is working in Maharashtra with farmer producer companies, sort of as the entry point for us. As you know, Maharashtra promotes a huge number of FPCs, and they've been able to share best practices, promote value addition, and fetch a better price through collective bargaining. But the government itself has noted that the large majority of these FPCs has failed to grow robustly since the initial push. So we agreed with the government then that we would focus on this. We undertook an evaluation of 21 FPCs in 4 districts, and we built a partnership with the World Bank program on climate resilient agriculture called CropCraft. And then we identified how to improve the capacity of knowledge of FPCs. On the other side, we also worked with institutional financial lenders to understand the information gap they face when making decisions on whether to extend credit. So we tried to address this clear disconnect between FPCs and IFLs, so the information barriers and capacity gaps. So we developed, one strategy was to develop an FPC rating tool, so it allows finance institutions to systematically evaluate the factors that facilitate or restrict FPC's business operations and trade readiness. So the scoring criteria are listed here. You'll notice one criteria relating to climate resilience. So this included a number of indicators such as how many climate resilient crops are being handled, how many technologies that could be considered climate resilient, water management technologies. Across all of the criteria were also gender-related indicators. So this tool has now been adopted by the government and the World Bank program, and 619 FPCs have been evaluated using it. We've also tried to roll it out through training both FPCs and local banks on using the tool, understanding what climate resilient agriculture means. We've developed model FPC business plans, and we're trying to roll this out to make sure that this sort of has maximum impact. So just finally, we've also, part of the program was very much emphasized on documenting learning, and some things that came out really were how important partnerships were to the success. Any organization can't deliver climate resilient agriculture at scale on their own, so we really had to tap into other people's local network, specific expertise. We also tried to forge partnerships with people that weren't like us. So we really tried to work with non-climate change organizations, and we tried to bridge that gap which often exists. And I think the key thing here is to recognize that there are limits to collaboration, and you have to actually recognize the interests, the incentives, the internal constraints of partners when trying to forge those collaborations. Lastly, I think in a 5-year program, it wasn't just enough time to build some of those partnerships, but anything less is very hard, and the more time that you have available allows you to invest in those partnerships. A part of that is also very simple, just making sure that everybody else can take credit for the work, because that helps build up their local expertise, their local reputation and contacts. If you have any more questions on this, we documented it in a learning paper. I have a few copies, or it's available online.